follows. So our particular special intergroup meets every month, the third Friday of every month from 1 to 2 p.m. We meet face-to-face, and we meet by conference call and WebEx. And you are all so warmly invited to join us. It's open membership. We have about 50 to 70 members across the country from about 12 different degree-granting institutions and hospitals. And if people can join that particular Friday, they do. And if they can't, they don't. So it's very open-ended, and we do research, leadership, advocacy, and education agenda items every month. Join us. Just let me know if you would like to join, and I will happily add you to our list. I'd like to talk with you for just a moment about Blyth Lord. I'm going to talk about her educational background, and then I'm going to talk about her life experience, and I'm also going to talk about how we met each other. So Blyth has an undergraduate degree in history from Yale University, and she has a graduate degree from Harvard in education. And she spent 2 decades in developing videos, news clips for national networks. It's really exciting, the work she has done, and how she's brought that forward to her current life work. Her life experience includes being a mom, a wife, and particularly be the mom in a family who had a seriously ill child who ultimately succumbed to a rare disease. And she will tell you about her daughter, Cameron. And she will tell you her life work now has been related to creating what is called Courageous Parents Network. And that network has as its goal to guide families with seriously ill children, but in addition to guide us as the healthcare providers for those children. So again, that unique perspective that you will find from Blyth, but you will also find on the network, which is a very alive network. I can share that with you. I met Blyth at the National Academies of the Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And we brought Blyth in to speak to us about her experience of working with a pediatrician in the care for her daughter, Cameron. And you will hear that mentioned. And just today, we were talking again about what I hope, I know you won't be surprised by this, that I really want her to write about this experience in collaboration with the pediatrician. I'm very hopeful of that coming to pass. Blyth is also on a committee for the American Academy of Pediatrics. She's a member of the committee and the co-chair of a subcommittee related to bereavement. So she comes particularly well prepared to really offer us her insight. So today, I want to tell you how really excited I am and how grateful I am that you are supportive of the fact that we are doing something really different. We have a parent scholar who is coming to teach us. Please would you join me in welcoming Blyth Lord.
Quite extraordinary that she obviously must have been a very good student in crafting, because she didn't even look at her notes and reciting my history. I was like, that's impressive. I was very, very honored when Dr. Hines invited me to come be here as a guest today at Palliative Care Month, speak to you. Firstly, because of my extraordinary admiration for the work that Dr. Hines has done, which you'll understand, especially why I admire it and am so grateful for it in a moment. But also because I obviously I know of Children's National and the Panda team, and I have known David for a while, but I haven't ever gotten to come here. And so it is a real treat for me. It is my favorite thing in the world to go to children's hospitals and meet with people such as yourselves who have committed yourself, your practice, and your day-to-day work caring for children who are living with medical complexity and serious illness. Because to me, it is the greatest vocation a person could be, one of the greatest vocations a person could be called to do. I was called to it out of necessity, and you guys were called to it out of some beautiful part of your heart. and heads. So as a parent, I thank you for that. This is a picture of my husband and my daughter, Cameron, which this story began with my daughter, but it's become much bigger than that. So, in fact, it's really not about her at all anymore or about us, but every now and then I have to plug a picture in because it reminds me that it did begin with our daughter, Cameron, and there she is. I have nothing to disclose except I am passionate about pediatric palliative care. I promote it shamelessly wherever I have an opportunity. I am deeply committed, and the work I do and Courageous Parents Network does is all about empowering parents caring for children living with serious illness and advancing education of non-palliative care pediatric providers to help them understand the needs and experiences of families living with caring for children with serious illness. I'm going to begin by showing a video, which I'm going to, let me go down. It was embedded in the PowerPoint, but it's so big that it wasn't playing very well. So Courageous Parents Network has at its core, and we'll go back and look at this more closely further on in our time together, videos of families, as Pam said, my background, it's okay, I've got it. Background of families caring for children with serious illness. My background is in video production, so Courageous Parents Network has over 500 videos of parents talking about their experience, and this is just giving you a flavor of one of that. Can you tell I'm a Mac person?
Palliative care became a part of our team around the second embolization, and they began.
Just pause here. This family, this is a couple. Their newborn son was cared for his entire life in the NICU. He lived for 3 months. He was born with a very severe AVM, and over the course of his short life, he had 5 brain surgeries, and he died at 3 months of age. I'm going to try to make this be full screen. Is that better?
Began as kind of this other group that would take extra time to sit with us and really get to know us and kind of talk to us. You know, somebody to ask, like, how do you feel about what you just heard? You know, they would sort of come in after we met with a group, or maybe they would have 1 or 2 members present when we were meeting with the neurology team, and they would ask us, you know, if we had questions, how we felt about what was happening. And we sort of bonded that way in a very natural and human way. And as that continued throughout all these procedures, when we came to the end, they were very helpful in us making sure that we felt that we were being heard. As we kind of shifted away from being so medically focused towards making sure that Sage was comfortable, that we were still feeling part of the team and feeling like everybody kind of knew where we were coming from and what we wanted for Sage, and making sure that they were all communicating, even when we weren't present, to try and make that happen for him.
Part of it too, Sage, because of the change in his treatment plan, because he had multiple brain surgeries, and he had 5 total, 4 of which occurred pretty close to each other. So he was on a good dose of painkillers. You know, he was on fentanyl for a while. You know, so PACT, they came in to help us manage medications, and then for the day that Sage passed, they were present to make sure that we were okay, and that Sage was not in pain. You know, they played a very big role in making sure that it was peaceful, because we felt like after everything that Sage had endured, we absolutely did not want him to die having a seizure. So we wanted that controlled. And they were there to help, respectfully outside of our room, but that was kind of the presence they played. But they, you know, I mean, palliative care, it's a very unique and multifaceted group. They have doctors, they have nurses, they have social workers. So medically speaking, we understood everything that was going on with Sage. We didn't need a lot of clarification, But we didn't know what to expect in terms of planning for the future because that was impossible. So they helped kind of paint that picture. And when it changed, when we got a new diagnosis or a new care plan or a new medication, we added that to the landscape that we were facing.
One thing I'd like to add as well is I remember very distinctly in many of our large meetings discussing SAGE that the members of our palliative care team were eyes that I would go to when I was looking for somebody who I knew was, had us, who was there and really kind of standing with us amongst the enormous group of medical professionals. It seemed like they really saw us as people and as parents, and it was a massive help to have them there.
It was also, we needed that. We needed to be seen as his parents. We needed to be seen. We were living our life as like new parents to Sage in front of all these people in a hospital.
I don't know how well you were able to hear that, but I hope that the key is, this couple is talking about how palliative care, they touch upon the pain management piece. And they're also talking about, at the end of the day, the palliative care team saw them and treated them as the parents that they were while they were living their lives in front of all these people in a very medically directed environment. And that's probably the most important thing that parents need help with, is feeling and support and being the parents that they are, as we know so well. So, what are some common family reactions to a serious diagnosis? This is sort of the top issues that families confront. They are obviously in addition to the deep sadness and sorrow and that they experience, they are utterly disoriented, confused. They don't understand, first of all, they don't know anything about their child's condition at the beginning, and they have to learn it, nor do they know anything about navigating the medical system, unless, of course, they are of that system, and that's not typical. They feel disempowered. The whole what, why me, why my child, had this happen? They are intimidated. There's a balance of power dynamic between them as parents and you as people with medical expertise and health expertise that they do not have. It's also, no matter how human you guys all are, the system in which you all operate is not as humane as anybody would like, and that is very intimidating and disempowering for new parents. It's isolating. The entire experience is very, very isolating. Most parents do not have somebody like them going through this with them, and they feel different, which exacerbates the fear that they have, fear of their child dying, fear of their ability to survive this. They are experiencing grief. Anticipatory grief is a very, very active ingredient in the lived family experience. I remember thinking that grief was something that just happened after the person had died. But in fact, when you are anticipating that somebody you love is going to die or have struggles, you immediately begin grieving. Certainly they're angry. Why my child? Not all people are angry, but that is a typical reaction. And some parents may feel pressure to find a cure. This is not a comprehensive list, nor is it true for all people. This is just sort of a sampling. I love this picture of Hannah with her son Sage in the NICU, and I just want to pause here for a moment and ask you to think about all the things that might be going through her mind as she looks at her little boy. What we can feel pretty confident that is going through her mind is that no matter what happens with Sage, she wants to know that she has been the very best mother she can possibly be to him in his life, regardless of how long that is. And I will say that when I had already started Courageous Parents Network when I found Dr. Hines' and her team's research, and this was just like this eureka moment for me. Finally, something that for me I knew to be true, and I knew to be true for all the parents that I was working with in Courageous Parents Network. Finally, there was literature to back it up. And I am forever grateful. And no matter what presentation I'm giving, wherever I'm giving it, this is always in it. Always, always, always. So, what do parents of children living with serious illness need? So, I've learned from a member of my board that there's this thing in the marketing world called unarticulated need. And an unarticulated need is exactly what it sounds like. It's a need that you have that you don't even have the language for to ask for it. As compared to when you're thirsty, you know, I'm thirsty. When I'm thirsty, I need a drink, and when the types of drinks I like are water, Coca-Cola, Diet Pepsi, ginger ale. We have language for thirst, and we have language for solving that. Parents caring for children with serious illness in the very early stages and as the needs progress do not have language for what it is they need, other than I need a treatment for my child and I need for my child not to suffer. That's the most obvious thing that they know that they need, but after that, they don't actually know what it is because it's for all the reasons that I told you before. They're completely disoriented, and there is no guidebook for this. So, in my travels and in the work that Courageous Parents Network has done with families, and I'm sure all of this will resonate with you in your own experience with families, these are the things that parents tell us that they need. They need to be validated as good parents, as being people who are doing the best they can in impossible situations. They need help understanding this new landscape. They need an appreciation of their day-to-day, both the practical, logistical challenges and the emotional issues that they're confronting. They need permission from the people working with them to ask the difficult questions and to have the difficult conversations. They need help understanding what it is they're experiencing. So, for example, this whole concept of anticipatory grief, I can't tell you how many parents have told me that when they read about it on Courageous Parents Network or they heard about it from somebody, how liberating it was for them to finally have language for something that they thought was making them strange. Sort of normalizing what it feels like a very abnormal situation. They seek and need guidance from parents like them, and they need help with medical decision making and finding hope. And there is always, 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 always hope. Even when the prognosis is bad, there is always room for hope. We just redefine, or as the literature says, we reframe what that hope is. Briefly, this all resonates with me personally because this was my own experience. My husband and I are there on the right, and my husband is an identical twin who married my roommate from college. I will say that my brother-in-law Tim and my roommate from college Allison, they started dating right before our wedding, so it wasn't we weren't double dating all the way through college. They'd known each other for a long while, but they only started dating right before. And when my second daughter Cameron was born, their first son Hayden, who at the time was a year old, was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And a few months later, when my daughter Cameron was 5 months old, they accurately diagnosed him as having infantile Tay-Sachs. The OT-PT people said this is not cerebral palsy, he's going backwards, there's something else going on here. And at that point, an ophthalmologist saw him and they saw the cherry red spots, and they said, okay, in fact, it's infantile Tay-Sachs. And at that point, my daughter, 5 months old, had just been given a glowing bill of health by her primary care pediatrician. And I went online and I was reading about Tay-Sachs, and I saw that one of the only early signs is that the children continue to startle, that they don't outgrow the infantile startle response. And Cameron had not outgrown the infantile startle response, and I was able to compare her to my older daughter, who at the time was 2, and I knew that this just gave me a sickening feeling. And I went to get tested. I assumed my husband was a carrier because he's an identical twin, and both parents have to be carriers to have an affected child. And my maternal grandmother is of Ashkenazi descent, so it was entirely possible that I was a carrier. And it came back that, in fact, I was, and the geneticist said, let's hope that it must be a false positive, because it would be so statistically improbable that all 4 of you would be carriers, especially because they'd never seen my sister-in-law's mutation before, and they never had seen my husband and his brother's mutation before. But within 2 weeks of learning that Hayden had infantile Tay-Sachs, we learned that my daughter, too, was not false positive. She, too, had it. So within 2 weeks' time, we were 4 parents in one family who had learned that these 2 beautiful children were going to die sometime in their early childhood. This was obviously an extraordinarily devastating development in our family. And yet, it went as well as something like that could go. And I attribute it to a number of things, which we'll look at. But quickly, I want to say that perhaps the most monumental thing that happened for me personally, which was the seed of Courageous Parents Network, is that my husband was present at his nephew's bedside when Hayden was dying. Hayden was a year older than our daughter, so he was progressing, and he died before my daughter. And we really had visibility into what end of life looked like, which most families, thankfully, mercifully, do not get. But we had a front row seat, and my husband was able to come and tell me. I was home in Boston with Cameron and my older daughter, Taylor, and I was pregnant with our 3rd child, and I was absolutely terrified for my brother and sister-in-law. I knew Hayden was in the last few days of his life, and I remember being in our kitchen, standing there, utterly terrified for my brother and sister-in-law, knowing that they were going to have to, that they were literally watching their son die, and not being able to imagine this at all. And I felt like if you had touched me, I would shatter. I really felt like a piece of fragile glass. And the phone rang, and it was Charlie on the phone, and he was in New York, and he said, I'm here at the bedside. Hayden is comfortable. Things are peaceful. Tim and Allison are okay, and we're going to be okay. And I can tell you that with that one call, the worst of my anxiety and dread lifted, and the way I was able to live and breathe into the last 5 months of my daughter's life shifted. It made all the difference. And then I saw Tim and Allison a few days later after Cameron had died, and I saw that they were still standing. I was convinced that I was going to fall to the floor and evaporate forever, sort of like the Avengers, the thing when people disappear. I thought that would be me, and I saw that they were still there. And that living proof of Hayden's end of life and their ability to survive, these were early days still yet, gave me a huge amount of confidence and really shifted how I was. So when we came a few years later, this is the 2 dads and their children. I love this picture. When we came out of the grief cave a few years later, and I took stock of how we were doing, and I said, I think I'm doing pretty well. I think we're doing pretty well. So why is that? And I concluded that it was because we were not alone. We had traveled that road with my brother and sister-in-law, who had led the way and had literally shown us what end of life looked like. And we had also had conversations with them about some of the more difficult decisions we were going to have to make. The 2 that stand out are, were we going to give our children feeding tubes, and also hospitalization around pneumonias, and also home versus hospital death. These were things that we would talk about. So we had those conversations with other people who happened to be our brother and sister-in-law and very close friends, and yet still, just the ability to process so closely and hear from somebody else made a big difference for us. Secondly, we received pediatric palliative care from our daughter's pediatrician, from our her primary care pediatrician, which made a tremendous difference in supporting us and with medical decision making. And, for example, we had conversations with him about how we ultimately were not going to give our daughter a feeding tube, and he supported us with that. We did medical orders with him, and ultimately, he was the one who, when he diagnosed her with her last pneumonia, because of all the conversations he had had with us, understood when we said we are not treating this last pneumonia, she'd had multiple, and that final pneumonia, and we said we're not treating this. He was prepared for that, and he supported us, and we transitioned entirely to comfort care, at which point he did bring in support from a pain management specialist who worked with our home care nurses to make sure that she was physically comfortable, because our nurses didn't know how to dose the medication, and the pediatrician didn't know the right level. So he brought in support, and she died peacefully at home. Finally, we had grief counseling pretty much from the moment we could find a decent grief counselor shortly after her diagnosis all the way for a year after she died. And all three of those things really helped us process what we were going through as we were going through it, and I believe helped us be in pretty solid shape as we emerged from the grief cave. Another thing, the other ingredient that really helped us, and was the seed of Courageous Parents Network, is we began telling our story. Because our story was so unusual, with these two twins, married roommates from college and having Tay-Sachs, we were interviewed before the children had died for NOVA. They did a 2-hour special on the Human Genome Project, and we were interviewed for that, and that was our first crack at telling the story. We then started that's Harvard Medical School, not pixelated very well. After Cameron died, we started giving talks with her primary care pediatrician. He was teaching at Harvard Med School, and we talked about how we worked. A primary care doctor could work with parents all the way from point of diagnosis through end of life, anticipatory guidance, advanced care planning, goals of care conversations. And we started doing that again and again and again. And so we got better and sort of more refined in telling the story. But then I realized I want to stop telling the story again and again and again, because it was getting a little stale, and I didn't want something that was so sacred to start feeling rote. So we worked with the American Academy of Pediatrics to turn the story of how we worked with our primary pediatrician, and he worked with us, into an educational video for the AAP called Cameron's Arc. And it is now available online for free. You don't have to go through the AAP bookstore. And it got its title from the fact that my husband, bless him, Charlie, he shortly after her diagnosis, he said, Cameron's life is going to have a full arc. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it will have an end. So while it is a short life, it will be a full life. And we really glommed on to that expression, and it helped us. So these three things, I saw, so let me back up. So we'd received palliative care, we'd received grief counseling, and we were not alone. And I compared that to what I was seeing in working with families also affected by Tay-Sachs, because I would go to the family conference. And I saw how powerful the conference was, because once a year families would come together and hear from each other. But I saw how typically when they weren't at the conference, which was 363 days a year, they were very, 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 very isolated, nor did they have an opportunity to tell their story. Nor were they typically receiving grief counseling, and pretty much none of them were receiving pediatric palliative care. And I saw a lot of how that was trickling down to some of the things that these families were wrestling with. So I wanted to take all the things that had helped my husband and me get through and make it available to families going through such a thing today. And that was I founded Courageous Parents Network in 2014, left my job at the time I was working for the PBS production station in Boston, WGBH, and I started Courageous Parents Network as a web and mobile platform to empower and support parents caring for children with serious illness, as well as the pediatric providers who support these families. All of our resources are available for free at no cost on the web, 24/7. The videos of parents, and you saw one, we'll go look at a few more, offer insights and guidance from parents who have been through that. I can't give them a brother and sister-in-law in their home, but I can bring them dozens and dozens of families who've been there, and parents in the middle of the night when all the creepy, scary questions come marching in can go online and hear from parents just like them. They may not like what they hear, and it might inform that they're going to make a different decision, but at least give them a way to hear from others like them. We also feature videos of pediatric providers such as child life, chaplaincy, nurses, palliative care, and psychologists framing the issues. So if they're not receiving care like that where they are, or even if they are but they want a little extra insight, they can go learn from more providers. We also have downloadable guides on everything from taking care of the siblings, understanding your child's nutritional needs, considering home versus hospice, death, things like that. All of our materials have been vetted by our professional advisory board. And we have no editorial agenda. We don't advocate for any particular decision. We feature families who've elected to get a feeding tube for their child and families who have said no to a feeding tube. Families who've had spinal fusion for their child, families who've said no. Families who want their child to die at home versus families who want their child to die at the hospital. But we do shamelessly promote the value of pediatric palliative care. We currently have about 84 videos of families talking about how palliative care made a difference in their child's illness journey and their ability to make decisions and cope. We also have families talking about how they wish when the palliative care provider was introduced to them, they hadn't said, leave, 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 you're the angel of death. They're like, oh, I really regret that I told them to leave, and now that I understand what palliative care is, I wish I'd said yes to palliative care sooner. This is just a screen grab of one of the pages on the website, which gives you a sampling of how we organize the video topics. 35 topics, beginning in the upper left with receiving the diagnosis in the beginning, and moving, if you scroll down, it ultimately ends up with bereavement, identity as a parent, meaning-making, and the idea is to organize like that. So if you are a newly diagnosed family, you might not want to go down and explore some of the end-of-life stuff. It might not apply to you at all. On the other hand, if you're a parent like me, the minute you get a diagnosis, even though it was years away, you might immediately want to see your future self. So this way, parents can hunt and peck. They're in control of what they see and what they listen to. So, several years after we launched Courageous Parents Network, we did a survey of the families who are using Courageous Parents Network. And we asked them, what is it about Courageous Parents Network that you value? What is it that CPN is helping you do? And this is the order in which they said they valued CPN. It helps us advocate for my child's needs. It helps me make decisions that work with my family's goals and values. It helps me set priorities that feel right for my family and child, and it helps me care for my other healthy children. And there was a long list of, well, I should also say that this was in terms of all the cross-tabbing. It was also, what are the things that matter most to you that CPN can do something about? So we didn't ask about pain and symptom management because CPN can't help with that. But cross-tabbing versus what is it that you care most about and how does CPN help? And this is where we landed. And I think this is a very clear and important list and dovetails a lot with the findings of Dr. Himes and others about this is what parents want to be able to say that they are doing and have done for their child and their family. And the fourth one, caring for the other healthy children, is a big, big, big thing. So the website is organized around things that parents tell us they care about. Help us make informed decisions, help us keep our family strong, and help me hear from providers and other parents like me. This is just a screen grab. I hope you will go online and check it out for yourself. All right, so we're going to go look at another video, and this is a mom of two sons with mitochondrial disease in conversation with a pediatric palliative care nurse.
When I make a decision and I go back on, I don't remember how I said it, but it was one of these things is, when I stop thinking, doing it for my heart and not for Avery, what's best for him, please remind me, right? Because I know I'm going to want to go back on what I say and just bring me back to that. And I don't remember how I phrased it, and Masha brings it up, often to me like, Nikki, this is one of those times that you told us to remind you that you made this decision, so you need to stick with that because this was the decision that you made. Because when you're in that crisis, it's easy to make the decision, but when you're in that crisis and I'm going to see that, line going flat, I'm going to want them to do chest compression. I know I am. But I have to say, I made this decision. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to do it when the time comes, but I want to be reminded of that. And that's when I need palliative care to say, Nikki, you made that decision already. And because I know what's best for Avery.
And when you're surrounded by medical technology and providers that know how to kind of do all those things, I think it's hard to remember
That paper that you signed.
and your love and your care and your parent role that you so beautifully exercised over so many years. So, and again, it's different for different families. So some families may say, I need you to do that in the hospital until I know, that for me, if that's unsuccessful, then I know I've gone there. But to help families really, take that apart in terms of what's right for them and their child, particularly with all they've been through. I mean, Avery's another example of he's been able to live with his central lines and with artificial nutrition and hydration.
Yeah, here's the baby.
And yet for some kids, they're, maybe when they're 20, it may be at different points that kind of intervention is causing more harm and suffering and really isn't benefiting them. So we want parents to know that there's not just one way, there's not just one answer. It's kind of putting it all together for that child and for that family.
So I'm sorry that the file is so big, at least right now on this laptop, that it sort of feels out of sync. But I promise you they play smoothly on the website. Here we go. So that's an example of how palliative care helps families, can help a parent navigate decisions and remind families of conversations that they had earlier, and this is what you want for your child. And of course, parents can always change their minds, but it is very hard to feel confident about the decision you're making in an emergency, in an acute situation, if you haven't had an opportunity to talk about the bigger picture in a less chaotic moment. One of the things that perhaps what has surprised me most about Courageous Parents Network is the response it has received from the pediatric provider community. I created Courageous Parents Network for parents. What I did not anticipate was how pediatric providers would receive it and use it. I was hoping and was gratified that they would take it as a safe place to refer families. That was always my goal. You are the #1 channel to families. You are the gateway. Every family of a seriously ill child has has a pediatrics provider. So I was always hopeful that they would see its value for families. What I had not anticipated is that they would see its value for them. And not just as a referring resource, but for education and training. And this has been a big thing for us, and Debbie talks about how she uses Courageous Parents Network videos in training. Dr. Pat O'Malley, who's on our advisory board and is head of the palliative care team at MGH for Children, said, the parent voices of CPN teach medical students, residents, and colleagues and reach them in ways that our traditional methods of education cannot, by giving us a privileged window into their lives. I have seen how each practitioner finds their own humanness and connections in these powerful parent stories and can take away a different understanding that helps them become better, more compassionate, and more effective caregivers. So then we went out and interviewed pediatric providers who were using Courageous Parents Network and said, what is it that you value? And they told us that in addition, obviously, to providing the highest quality of medical care, they felt that Courageous Parents Network, first and foremost, helped them educate themselves about the lived family experience, help them educate their colleagues and trainees, and finally help them be a better resource for their patient families. So this was very gratifying, and I would encourage you to keep this in mind as you go about your days, that this is always available to you. In fact, we took this and turned it into, we created a provider portal, which when you join CPN and identify yourself as a provider, you will have access to the portal where we have sort of curated the content and written specific content to help non-palliative care providers, because palliative care providers already have this, sort of fundamentals in how to have difficult conversations around delivering the diagnosis, introducing palliative care, doing advanced care planning, supporting families in bereavement, also shared decision-making and educating self and colleagues. So we've taken what we've heard and we've packaged things to be more helpful to you all in the work that you do. I've tried to capture sort of how I think about Courageous Parents Network and its two audiences, parents and providers. And those of you who are familiar with Dr. Doolittle, you know the push me, pull you creature. And I'm like, okay, so is it push me, pull you? Is it parents are pushing in one direction and providers pulling, or what is it? What is the image? I was like, no, that feels a little oppositional and unhelpful. So maybe it's more like, actually, I mean, obviously this is sort of hilarious, but I've always wanted to use this painting in talk, and I'll finally use it. Is it a wolf? And who's the parent and who's the provider? I think this is just me getting to use the painting. So it's not that. So then this past weekend, I threw this in there, I was at a art gallery in St. Louis, and this is a sculpture by the dissident activist Chinese artist named Ai Weiwei. I don't know if any of you have heard him. His work is extraordinary, and it's called Grapes. And what it is a huge number of stools that have been put together to form this sort of orb with a really nice little safe space in the middle. And what they say about, what he wrote about the grapes is, it is a configuration where each stool shares a leg with at least one other stool. And I thought, you know what, this actually is an image that captures what I think of as happening between families and providers in the shared enterprise of caring for a seriously ill child. You share, you're each independent leg of a stool, and then you share that third leg. And when you come together in this constellation, you create a safe space for the child and also for the family, which makes all the difference in how the family lives and experiences the care that they receive, and also, I would venture a guess, in how you experience the care that you deliver, which is what calls you into medicine in the first place. So, the way we think about it is that we can help parents and providers mutually understand each other, communicate more effectively, and make decisions together for or with the child, and in so doing, influence the course of care, both given and received. I will get into this separately later in the afternoon with Pam, because especially in the interest of time, I want to take any questions you have. We are getting involved in research. We're being invited to participate in research. We're producing materials specifically that combine the parent and provider voice to help with particular projects, and Boston Children's Hospital invited us to create content with them on shared decision-making for spinal fusion surgery. So we did a guide and produced a series of videos to help with that. We also are doing a project with the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Center to Advance Palliative Care. It's an EQUIP course, a merited certification course on serious illness conversations in primary palliative care. And we have helped inform survey instruments for a nursing project at UPenn, and something that the acute care, that MICU or the medical ICU is doing on goals of care conversations and advanced care planning at Boston Children's. And then I'm not going to show the last video because it just doesn't play very well. It's beautiful. It's the same couple talking about how they feel in their bereaved state now, and it's just beautiful. And you can go find it in your own time. And last but not least, I will show you this. I hope you will. Oops. Here we go. What's it? Oh, cancel. Sorry. And full screen. I hope you will join the network, and please feel free to contact me at my email down here at the bottom. And thank you very much for your time. These are handout cards given to families. They're expressly written for you to hand out to families to describe what CPN is and how it might help. So,
Blyth, thank you so much for being our parent scholar, and may I invite your questions and comments for Blyth Lord. Thank you so much. That was really a wonderful talk, and I have seen your videos and read some of the handouts. It's really wonderful for all of the reasons that you described. So I have sort of a larger question that I just wanted to get your thoughts on in terms of like how people at large view palliative care. And I've been involved in palliative care for a long time, and I sort of had always thought that part of the challenges that we have is because it's pediatrics, and everyone sort of thinks like children should never die, so no one wants to talk about it, and those challenges definitely are always true. But I've been struck over the last couple of years when I've had several friends whose parents have gotten ill and died, and dealt with in my own family, and been struck by how it's not just pediatrics, it's really an aversion to talk about end-of-life issues, kind of universally. And I've had several friends where, they describe things that are going on with their parents, and I hear kind of the constellation of things that are going on, and I know as a physician, there is no way that this person is getting out of this horrible medical condition that they're in, and yet they're not preparing the family at all that it's very likely that their parent is going to die, and that they need to make these decisions. And it's not even that they're not having it upstream, they're not even having it, in the last week of life, and then it always comes as such a shock that the person dies. And it feels like our job in pediatric palliative care is made even harder by the fact that we can't even talk about this in relationship to adults. And so I was just sort of wondering your thoughts about this and sort of how we change the whole way that we approach death and dying in this country.
So, yes. I think we just need to practice what we preach. And, happily, or fortunately, the drumbeat is growing with books like Being Mortal, and the things that Tolgawande has done, and the series, the work that Ellen Goodman has done with the Serious Illness Conversation Project. And I know in the state of Massachusetts, which happens to be where I live, they have the Massachusetts Coalition for Serious Illness Care, which is all about moving advanced palliative care up so that primary care geriatricians are having conversations about goals of care with their patients before they're sick, and reimbursement and all the model. And the Center of Advanced Palliative Care is obviously working hard to advance this too. I think literally we have to shamefully talk about our work and be prepared to talk about it with our peers, especially our friends who have aging parents. That having been said, I'll give you an example. One of my very best friends, who's been a tremendous supporter of Courageous Parents Network, was there for me when Cameron was dying. She's been a donor to CPN. She knows all about palliative care. She's come and heard me talk. Her mother was diagnosed with a serious form of cancer. And I talked to her. We would have breakfast. I would talk to her about, have you had a palliative care consult for your mother? And the palliative care consult for her mother was going to happen when her mother got back to Mount Sinai in New York. But first, her mother was convinced by an oncologist, that she was eligible for a clinical trial for this new therapy that involved going up to Buffalo, where she had no family, to be in the trial, and 2 members of the sibling group said, I want Mom in that trial. And my friend felt like she didn't have a voice in this, and the mother-in-law went into a coma in Buffalo and died in the ambulance ride back to Mount Sinai, so never, ever got to have the palliative care consult. And my feeling on that is shame on the doctor who offered this treatment in the first place, because this woman was never getting better. And I was upset about the 2 siblings, but I also understand that's human. And so if we can just change the way we frame these things.
I think that's an outstanding example, because from my perspective, knowing only what you just said, that is a significant conflict of interest within the academic institutions in general, right? Like, we are simultaneously trying to give the best care possible while simultaneously trying to develop the best care possible, and there are financial incentives going in the opposite directions in each way.
Yeah.
So I think that's an unfortunate, but I bet you incredibly popular.
I think advocacy. I have to tell you, advocacy is a big movement. I mean, it's a big movement. But I know, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics has for their NCE next year, the theme is advocacy. And it's all about how do we harness pediatric providers to get out there at the state, district, and national level to advocate for palliative care and to educate about what it is and what it isn't and various things. So I think that's also being prepared. Just writing a letter to your local paper, showing up on Capitol Hill, or volunteering to be available if needed, that can also go a long way.
May I thank everyone online. It's an incredible turnout online, and every one of you in the room, but most especially for Blyth, helping us to honor this month and what it means to all of us and to our nation. Huge thanks.
To our nation.